I don't have my glasses on. I'm going to need help with that. I need to get my glasses brought down here. The committee will come to order, and the chair recognizes herself for an opening statement. With this markup, the committee looks to build upon our record of success, and we have a number of bills that will be voted on tomorrow. H.R. 1321, the Microbead Free Waters Act of 2015, will establish a federal standard to ensure rinse-off cosmetic products do not contain plastic microbeads. This will keep these tiny beads out of our waterways and help manufacturers comply with the timeline. H.R. 2017, the Common Sense Nutrition Act of 2015, is an important piece of legislation that enables businesses to comply with menu labeling in a way that is most helpful to the customer. The administration's one-size-fits-all regulations simply will not work. It does not work for businesses, and more importantly, it does not help the consumer. The legislation aims to provide consumers with information in a helpful way and to make unworkable regulations workable. H.R. 3014, the Medical Controlled Substances Transportation Act, would amend current statute to allow inherently mobile medical providers like team doctors and emergency responders to appropriately care for their patients while minimizing the risk of abuse and diversion of controlled substances. This is an important issue that must be resolved in a responsible manner. The committee is ready and willing to work with DEA and DOJ on making sure we do so in the least burdensome manner, but we have heard nothing but purported problems and have not seen any proposed solutions. H.R. 3537, the Synthetic Drug Control Act, was reported out of the Health Subcommittee 2 weeks ago. The bill would combat the dangerous proliferation of synthetic drugs in neighborhoods across the country. We must be aggressive to stay one step ahead of the bad actors, but we cannot hinder the legitimate research taking place in this process. The committee is still working on a bipartisan basis to strike the right balance, but we are not quite there yet. That said, we will remove H.R. 3537 from today's slate of bills, but plan to move this critically needed piece of legislation forward in the near future. H.R. 3716, the Ensuring Terminated Providers Are Removed from Medicaid and CHIP Act. This bipartisan bill would implement several targeted recommendations by the Office of the Inspector General at HHS to address a flaw in the President's health law and improve CMS oversight of terminated providers, also improving each state's incentives to better police their programs and screen providers. The amendment, in the nature of a substitute, incorporates technical assistance from CMS. H.R. 3821, the Medicaid Directory of Caregivers Act, would require states to publish online information about primary care and specialty care providers who participate in Medicaid, ensuring beneficiaries are empowered with better information about accessing health care. The amendment, in the nature of a substitute, incorporates technical assistance from CMS. We will also consider H.J. Res. 71 and 72 as we continue fighting the administration's rampant regulatory overreach. The Congressional Review Act created an expedited process for rejecting out-of-control federal regulations, and it is hard to think of a more appropriate use for this Clinton administration statute than to stop EPA's rules targeting carbon dioxide emissions from new and existing power plants. These two rules are as unlawful as they are unworkable and offer no environmental benefits to justify the double-digit increases many American households and businesses would see on their electric bills. These two resolutions stand up for family budgets, jobs, and American economic competitiveness. And last, we'll vote on S. 611, the Grassroots Rural and Small Community Water Systems Assistance Act, taking an important step toward reauthorizing the Rural Water Technical Assistance Program. This bill passed the Senate earlier this year by unanimous consent. This popular program is important to all our rural water system managers and to their customers who need technical assistance to comply with the Safe Drinking Water Act's stringent standards, protecting jobs, keeping energy affordable, promoting clean drinking water, and protecting public health. Each of these bills are important to folks in Tennessee and across the nation and deserve our strong support. I now recognize the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Pallone, for 5 minutes for an opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. We will be covering a variety of issues, including health, energy, and the environment in this markup today. Many of these bills before us are important bipartisan policy advances that the committee should be proud to move forward. However, I am disappointed with several bills that appear to exist only as transparent partisan attempts to block critical environmental and energy proposals put forward by President Obama. I'd like to begin by discussing several of the bipartisan bills that will improve our nation's health. Two of the bills that were noticed for today's markup are products of the committee's numerous discussions on our nation's substance abuse crisis. As we've learned through our deliberations, synthetic drug use has been on the rise, creating a tremendous danger for our nation's youth. H.R. 3537, the Synthetic Drug Control Act of 2015, would allow the DEA to take a proactive approach to this emerging trend and would place a number of synthetic substances under Schedule 1 of the Controlled Substances Act. The committee is not taking up this legislation today in order to address concerns we've heard about access to substances that may have legitimate research uses, so I look forward to continuing ongoing work with the majority to address these concerns before further consideration by the full committee. The other bill, H.R. 3014, the Medical Controlled Substances Transportation Act of 2015, also addresses the regulations surrounding controlled substances. This legislation would allow registered physicians increased flexibility to transport certain controlled substances away from their registered practice locations and intends to facilitate the ability for doctors to travel across state lines for disaster response efforts or to care for players while working as a team doctor in games out of state. Beyond public health, we'll also consider two Medicaid bills today. H.R. 3821, the Medicaid DOC Act, or DOC Act, is a bipartisan initiative to improve transparency in the Medicaid program. Specifically, it would require states that participate in fee-for-service Medicaid to publish up-to-date provider directories, information which is critically important to patients. Throughout the legislative process, we've refined the language to ensure Medicaid beneficiaries will receive the information they demand in an easily understandable format, and I look forward to continuing this effort as we move forward. In addition to transparency, the next piece of legislation is a bipartisan bill that addresses Medicaid program integrity, H.R. 3716, the Ensuring Terminated Providers Are Removed from Medicaid and CHIP Act, ensures that disqualified providers in one state are unable to receive ineligible payments by simply crossing state lines. This bill provides CMS with critical tools to keep patients safe and protect taxpayer dollars. Of note, an amendment before the committee makes additional technical changes, and this is by nature a complex bill, but an important one to get right, and I look forward to continuing work on this initiative. While I've been proud to work in a bipartisan manner on the bills I just discussed, unfortunately, I can't support the next piece of legislation, H.R. 2017, the Common Sense Nutrition Disclosure Act of 2015, would amend the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act to revise how caloric and other nutritional information is displayed in restaurants and other retail food establishments. I strongly believe that consumers deserve access to accurate and consistent calorie and nutrition information. While I appreciate the work that's been done on this bill, I remain concerned that we're not doing enough to help consumers make informed food choices, and I do not believe this is the appropriate approach. In addition to America's health, we are also addressing issues of the environment today. I'm proud to say Chairman Upton and I have worked together to develop and introduce the next bill, H.R. 1321, the Microbead-Free Waters Act of 2015, which requires the FDA to prohibit the manufacturing of personal care products containing plastic microbeads beginning in 2017. Synthetic plastic microbeads have polluted our nation's waters for years, and action is long overdue. I'm very pleased that the committee is finally taking steps to address this problem, and I urge my colleagues to join me in supporting this legislation. Today we have two energy-related bills. Unfortunately, very controversial. As many of you already know, this week marks the 25th anniversary of the Clean Air Act amendments of 1990, which ushered in a new era of comprehensive and bipartisan public health protections. Our history has shown time and again that pollution reduction and economic growth go hand in hand, and there is no evidence to suggest the Clean Power Plan will be any less successful in enhancing both public health and the economy. Yet Republicans are using the same scare tactics that clean air opponents have used for decades. For 45 years, industry has made doomsday claims that clean air regulations would destroy businesses and jobs, drive prices skyward, and cripple economic growth. Of course, they've been wrong every time, and I expect the House Republicans will use the identical rhetoric today when discussing EPA's power plant rules. But the fact remains, the Clean Air Act has yielded more than $57 trillion in benefits since 1970. And lastly, the final bill, S611, is a small but productive step forward in ensuring safe and reliable drinking water for all Americans. It's not the text I would have preferred, and I appreciate the Chairman keeping his promise to work with us on report language that addresses some of our concerns. And I look forward again to working across the aisle on other issues related to safe drinking water, including reauthorization of the State Revolving Fund. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Gentleman yields back. The chair reminds members that pursuant to the committee rules, all members' opening statements will be made a part of the record. Are there further opening statements? I now recognize Chairman Upton for 5 minutes for an opening.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This marks our 10th full committee markup this Congress. And with over 100 hearings on the books, we've advanced more than 3 dozen bills through the House. This committee has built a proud record of bipartisan success, and we certainly look forward to continue our momentum as we consider 8 more bills to protect jobs and affordable energy, boost rural America's drinking water, and several bills to protect the public health. These bills will certainly have a positive impact in Michigan, but also around the country. One bill that we're going to consider is especially important to the Great Lakes and will help protect all lakes, rivers, streams, and from a very pesky problem, microbeads. They're tiny plastic, but big-time pollution. Microbeads, as you can see, are those tiny little scrubbers in your soap, cleansers, and even toothpaste. On their own, they're nearly invisible, smaller than a pinhead, as you can see, compared with the size of a penny. But once they're flushed down the drain, that's where the problem starts. Because they're so small, they escape water filtration systems and end up in our bodies of water. They're known to absorb pollutants and are often mistaken as food by fish and wildlife. Simply put, microbeads are causing mega problems. So I partnered with Ranking Member Frank Pallone to author this bill, H.R. 1321, the Microbeads Free Water Act of 2015, which will fight the army of microbeads that is growing by the day in our waters, and I would hope that everyone will join us in supporting this effort, not only tomorrow, but also when it reaches the House floor soon. The committee has also long worked to protect jobs and keep energy prices affordable for the administration's expansive regulatory agenda. Mr. Whitfield's joint resolutions 71 and 72 are 2 CRA, Congressional Review Act, resolutions that continue our efforts addressing EPA's recently finalized carbon dioxide rules for new and existing power plants. EPA's rules seek to change fundamentally the way that we generate, distribute, and consume electricity across the country. These resolutions are ultimately about protecting hardworking people from higher electricity prices, threats to grid reliability, and EPA's economy-wide energy tax. I would also note that a democratically controlled Congress wisely rejected cap and trade in 2010, and those rules are just as ill-advised today. Another bill that we'll consider to address pending regulations is H.R. 2017, Common Sense Nutrition Disclosure Act of 2015, introduced by Conference Chair Kathy McMorris Rogers. This bill would make federal menu labeling requirements workable so that businesses with different models can comply and provide consumers with nutrition information in the most meaningful way. Forcing such a diverse industry that includes grocery stores, restaurants, convenience stores, and movie theaters to comply with such strict and narrow regulations limits the positive effect menu labeling can have. Lastly, for those paying attention, I began my remarks by stating we'll be voting on 8 bills, though we noticed 9. We'll not be considering H.R. 3537, Synthetic Drug Control Act, as still we have a little work to do. We're working with Mr. Dent, the author, as well as Mr. Pallone and the research community to strike the right balance. We're committed to stay one step ahead of the bad actors while not hindering legitimate research in the process. We're close, but not quite there yet, so we'll be reporting it out of full committee in the near future, and I yield back my time. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. Tonko, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am pleased to see that today we are marking up the Medicaid Directory of Caregivers Act, also known as the Medicaid DOC Act. This is legislation that I joined with my colleague and friend from New York, Representative Collins, in introducing. I thank Representative Collins for his initiative in this area and for working together on this issue in a collaborative, bipartisan way. I also thank the Energy and Commerce staff on both sides for providing constructive feedback to move this bill to markup. The impetus behind this bill is simple and straightforward: to make it easier for Medicaid beneficiaries to find and access a doctor. The Medicaid Directory of Caregivers Act would require states that operate a fee-for-service Medicaid program to publish an online provider directory, just like managed care plans and private insurance are already required to do. By creating a one-stop shop for Medicaid beneficiaries to find information on participating providers, this common-sense legislation will make it easier for individuals and families to access quality health care. I'm proud to support the bipartisan and consumer-friendly Medicaid DOC Act, and I urge my colleagues to support this legislation. I also speak in support of S611, the Grassroots Rural and Small Community Water Systems Assistance Act. S611 reauthorizes a small but important program that delivers technical assistance and training to community water systems. The ratepayer base for these small systems does not provide a sufficient operating budget to support full-time technical positions. Technical assistance programs like circuit riders and source water protection programs help small utility operators to keep clean, safe drinking water flowing to their customers. I congratulate Representative Harper and thank him for introducing the House companion bill to S611, H.R. 2853. And thank you, Chair Shimkus, for working with us on report language to clarify language in the bill. I look forward to continuing to work with you and the other members of our subcommittee to address the many needs we already heard related to drinking water infrastructure. S611 is a good bill, and I urge my colleagues to support it. And with that, Madam Chair, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Chairman Pitts, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me make opening remarks on the bills that reported from the Health Subcommittee. First, H.R. 1321, the Microbead-Free Waters Act of 2015, as illustrated by this Lincoln Penny chia pet, somebody called it. You notice the little beads were smaller than the zero in the date on the bill. But this bill, sponsored by Fred Upton and Mr. Pallone, was approved by our Health Subcommittee on May 14, 2015. And water quality experts have determined that microbeads are ending up in lakes, streams, coastal waters across the country. Many states, even counties, have legislated or are legislating on microbead usage. The issue becomes whether federal regulation to control or ban microbeads is necessary. Our Health Subcommittee held a hearing on the issue with stakeholders and state legislators and concluded that a national solution was needed. The subcommittee marked up and approved this legislation, which amends the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act and bans the sale or distribution of cosmetics containing synthetic plastic microbeads beginning July 1, 2018. H.R. 2017, the Common Sense Nutrition Disclosure Act, sponsored by Kathy McMorris Rogers and Representative Sanchez, also amends the Federal Food and Drug and Cosmetic Act to revise the nutritional information that restaurants and retail food establishments must disclose. This legislation is in response to the overly burdensome regulations published by the FDA in December of 2014. This bill limits the regulations to foods that are truly standardized at 20 or more locations, provides some flexibility on the placement and display of the nutritional information, and clarifies that a menu is not the same as an advertisement, and includes limited liability protections along with a longer time frame within which to comply. H.R. 3014, the Medical Controlled Substances Transportation Act, sponsored by Representative Sessions, will allow physicians to transport medications containing controlled substances across state lines to another practice setting or disaster area, so long as the physician is registered. H.R. 3716, the Ensuring Terminated Providers Are Removed from Medicaid and CHIP Act, sponsored by Dr. Bashan, would fix problems identified by the Inspector General and protect patients by ensuring that Medicaid or CHIP providers that are terminated in one state will also be terminated in other states. Finally, H.R. 3821, the Medicaid Directory of Caregivers Act by Representative Collins, would assist Medicaid beneficiaries served in fee-for-service and primary care case management programs in identifying providers participating in Medicaid by requiring states to publish an electronic provider directory. These common-sense, bipartisan bills will help make our health care system better, serve patients while keeping the cost controls. I support the bills, urge their adoption by the committee, and yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Ms. Schakowsky for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I support some of the legislation we will consider tomorrow, but I'll focus my time on 3 bills that I do not. I am strongly opposed to H.R. 2017, the Common Sense Nutrition Disclosure Act. At a time when obesity in this country continues to be a very serious and costly public health problem, we should not be undermining efforts to educate consumers about nutritional value of the foods they eat. For example, where is it? Okay, an estimated 3 billion pizzas are eaten every year in the United States. And given the popularity of this food item, it's critical that we provide consumers with the accompanying nutritional information. Now, we heard a lot about how complicated this is, so I thought I could offer a suggestion. Here is a mock-up that took a couple of minutes, actually, to put together. This isn't a hardship for food providers. It's an asset for consumers. There's one slice of pizza. How much is a plain slice of pizza? And then how many calories would be added if you put pepperoni on it, or onions, or whatever? And you could make that sign, and I'm happy to offer my mock-up. Climate change is one of the most serious challenges this generation and this Congress faces. H.J. Res. 71 and H.J. Res. 72 disapproving the Clean Power Plan would undermine efforts to address the challenges head-on. 14 of the 15 hottest years on record have occurred in this century, and we're on pace to set a new all-time record this year. The National Climate Assessment showed that without major intervention by the end of the century, oceans will rise as much as 4 feet, water shortages will increase rapidly, our hottest days could be 10 degrees hotter, food will become more scarce, global conflict will increase, and more people compete for increasingly scarce resources. The Clean Power Plan is a well-constructed approach to the climate crisis we face. For the first time in our history, there will be restrictions on emissions from power plants, which are responsible for almost 1/3 of all U.S. carbon emissions. The Clean Power Plan provides important flexibility for states and businesses as they work to meet its requirements. It will protect our environment, improve public health, and even cut energy costs. Each American family will save, it's estimated, about $85 a year in 2030. Overall, the plan will save consumers $155 billion from 2020 to 30. The public and leading organizations around the country support the Clean Power Plan. Let's see if there was anything else here that I wanted to mention. I guess it's just time for my climate-denying colleagues to face facts. Climate change is real. It is in large part the result of human activity, and it can be reduced and reversed, but only if we accept the facts and embrace the common sense solutions. I yield back. Thank you.
Chairman Whitfield, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Madam Chairman. I might say that 2 of the resolutions we will take up tomorrow are resolutions of disapproval under the Congressional Review Act. These resolutions address the EPA's recently published final rules to regulate carbon dioxide emissions from new and existing electric generating units. These rules were finalized without consultation with Congress, input from Congress, and in direct opposition to the express will of Congress. And the Congressional Review Act is not something that we use lightly, but it is an oversight tool that provides the legislative branch with the powers to overturn a major regulation issued by a federal agency. The act can be invoked to prevent a rule that exceeds an agency's statutory authority. Over the past 24 months in hearings and letters, this committee has developed an extensive record documenting the unprecedented overreach of EPA in these rules. EPA went far beyond its statutory authority. In fact, they changed 30 years of their own legal interpretation on the existing rule, saying that they now could regulate under Section 111D of the Clean Air Act, which changed 30 years of their own legal opinions. If Congress had wanted to authorize a comprehensive transformation of the way America produces, delivers, and uses its electricity, we would have said so. If Congress wanted to see a wholesale federal takeover of state authority on electricity policy, we would have said so. And if Congress wanted to write fossil fuels largely out of America's energy future, we would have said so. Without question, these rules are going to have a dramatic impact on the pocketbook of those people most vulnerable in our society. We know that 40 states are going to expect to see average retail rates go up 10% or more, 17 states 20% or more, and 10 states by an average retail price of 30% or more. Another message we're going to send when we adopt these resolutions, the President's getting ready to go to France next month, where he'll be coronated the one person more concerned about climate change than any other person in the world. And we all recognize climate is changing, but there are more pressing issues. And the EPA testified repeatedly that they had worked closely with the states. Yet 27 states have already filed suits against these regulations and on the existing plant regulations. 23 states have filed on the new plant regulations, and a multitude of other entities. So it's essential that we pass these resolutions to bring some common sense into the President's climate change policies. I would ask unanimous consent that in support of these resolutions, we have 7 or 8 entities here, including the American Farm Bureau, the Chamber, that support this, and I would ask that these be on the record. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. Latta, 5 minutes.
I thank the Chairwoman. We have many important pieces of legislation up for consideration today, and I'm pleased to see them getting closer to passage in the full House. We are considering 2 resolutions of disapproval, showing that it is the will of Congress and the American people that the President's climate agenda must be stopped. I have multiple concerns about the EPA's recently finalized rules regarding the regulation of greenhouse gases at both new and existing power plants. These resolutions of disapproval, which I am a co-sponsor of, are important for us to advance so these rules have no force and effect. Many states, including my home state of Ohio, believe that there are legal challenges to both rules and have joined together in the lawsuits. While these challenges begin, it is vital that Congress also act to stop these rules from going into effect. Ohio has seen a great resurgence in its manufacturing sector while also working to reduce carbon emissions for cleaner air. Under the final rules, the numbers set for Ohio are stricter than they were in the draft form and do not take into account the majority of clean air gains that the state has made over the last decade. This fact only intensifies the concerns I have about the costs that these rules will impose on businesses and ratepayers. I also remain concerned about the reliability of our electric grid under these final rules. If plants are shut down in order to comply with the final rule, but no infrastructure, including generation, transmission, and distribution, is not up and running, reliability issues will affect the entire country. The Clean Power Plan is a misguided proposal by the EPA and an attempt to get cap-and-trade policy implemented by going around Congress. I look forward to advancing these resolutions to protect Ohioans and the country. I'm also pleased to support H.R. 2017, the Common Sense Nutrition Disclosure Act of 2015. I began working on this issue in 2011 after the FDA issued the proposed rule, when I led a letter to then Commissioner Homburg expressing my concerns with the onerous and burdensome regulation. I am pleased to be a co-sponsor of H.R. 2017, which provides flexibility to ensure entities can utilize appropriate methods for food labeling that fit their business models and are less burdensome than the current regulation. I fully support this legislation and look forward to its passage out of committee. Thank you again, Madam Chairwoman, for holding today's markup. I look forward to supporting all the bills up for consideration, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. Collins, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Today I speak in favor of my common sense bipartisan legislation, H.R. 3821, the Medicaid Directory of Caregivers, or Medicaid DOC Act. The fact is, health insurance through Medicaid serves little to no purpose if beneficiaries are unable to access care. Unfortunately, due to low provider reimbursements and antiquated state delivery systems, Medicaid beneficiaries often struggle to find doctors who will treat them. I firmly believe that as we work to improve the Medicaid program, beneficiary access issues and increased program integrity must go hand in hand. The Medicaid DOC Act requires that state Medicaid programs that operate on a fee-for-service or primary care case management basis publish an electronic listing of physicians who have billed Medicaid in the previous year. This directory will include the name and specialty of the provider, as well as the practice's address and phone number. If the provider is participating in a PCCM system, the bill also requires information be posted about whether the provider is accepting new Medicaid patients and what language capabilities the provider's office can accommodate. Today, some states already have these types of directories in place, but many do not. This bill requires a simple change that is intended to get Medicaid beneficiaries out of the expensive emergency room first mentality and into normal primary care settings when that is the appropriate treatment option. I want to thank my fellow upstate New Yorker, Mr. Taco, for his support in making this a bipartisan initiative. It's no secret that we may not always see eye to eye on policy, but his commitment to this issue demonstrates the great work this Congress can accomplish by finding common ground. Madam Chair, I always say that when common sense meets good government, good things will happen. The process of this bill has been open, and we've accepted comments and language alterations from the state Medicaid directors and CMS to ease, with implementation, improve the bill's effectiveness. Again, I thank the committee for its commitment to improving the Medicaid program. I believe this bill is a step in the right direction toward that goal. I urge my colleagues to support this bill and yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. Bilirakis, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate it so very much. There are a number of important bills we are discussing today, and we'll vote on tomorrow. I'd like to highlight a couple. Today, we will mark up two congressional resolutions of disapproval on the EPA's finalized rules regulating new and existing power plants. The administration has made it clear that overbearing energy regulation will be its legacy. Such regulations come at the expense of consumers, in my opinion. The increased costs these electric utilities face will undoubtedly be passed along to my constituents and put many hardworking people actually out of a job, and that's a real shame. With constantly changing energy prices, many Floridians find it difficult to pay their bills, operate their farms, or run their businesses. These costs have a detrimental impact on our local and national economy. Adding new regulations on energy use would make this economic hardship even worse. These two resolutions, which I'm proud to have co-sponsored, will halt these harmful EPA rules, protecting grid reliability and consumers' wallets. I also want to highlight the Common Sense Nutrition Disclosure Act, H.R. 2017, which I'm a co-sponsor. I've met with many local businesses that are negatively impacted by FDA's overly burdensome regulations. H.R. 2017 would allow flexibility to ensure entities could utilize alternative methods to food labeling that are appropriate for the diverse business models and are less burdensome. This legislation allows businesses in the food industry to provide nutrition information to consumers in the best way possible. Additionally, H.R. 3716, the ensuring terminated providers are removed from Medicaid and CHIP Act, would implement several recommendations by HHS Office of the Inspector General. This would improve CMS's oversight of terminated providers and help protect both patients and taxpayers. With these bills, we have the chance to continue our efforts to help patients, families, consumers, and communities across the country. And I'm proud we have worked together to create such legislation. Thank you again for allowing me to speak, and I yield back the balance of my time, Madam Chair.
Gentleman yields back. The chair calls up H.J. Res. 71 and asks the clerk to report.
H.J. Res. 71, providing for congressional disapproval under Chapter 8 of Title 5 United States Code of a rule submitted by the Environmental Protection Agency relating to standards of performance for greenhouse gas emissions from new, modified, and reconstructed stationary sources, electric utility generating units.
Without objection, the first reading of the joint resolution is dispensed with, and the joint resolution will be open for amendment at any point. So ordered. We are now on H.J. Res. 71, and the committee will reconvene at 10 a.m. tomorrow. I remind members that the chair will give priority recognition to bipartisan amendments. I look forward to seeing everyone tomorrow morning. Without objection, the committee stands in recess.